I cannot believe it!
Anissa decided not to tell her husband and go to the cemetery herself, to visit the grave of his first wife and lay flowers. But as she approached, she dropped the bouquet from her hands when she saw. Before all this happened, before life split into a before and after, it was just an ordinary autumn day. It all began with a simple, quiet desire to do the right thing, at least for herself. That morning, Anissa Brennan woke up with a clear and firm intention. Today. It had to be today. 5 years. A date felt significant, almost like an anniversary. 5 years since her husband David became a widower. 5 years since his first wife, Kira McLaughlin, died in a car accident. At breakfast, David was, as usual, a bit distracted, lost in his thoughts about blueprints and construction projects. He stirred sugar into his tea, staring out the window at the gray morning light. Anissa watched his hands, strong, capable hands of an engineer, and felt the familiar mix of tenderness and quiet sadness. She was his second wife, his safe harbor after the storm. That's how he used to say it, and she believed him. "Do you have a busy day at the factory?" he asked, without looking up. "Yes, as always," Anissa replied. The lie came easily. It was only half a lie. There was always plenty to do at the textile factory she managed. She needed to check the new cutting department and meet with hardware suppliers. "I might be late." "All right, don't overwork yourself," he said, finally meeting her eyes. In his gaze was the same warmth that had once made her fall in love with him. She didn't tell him where she was really going after work. This was her own decision, her private ritual. David never spoke about Kira, ever. There were no photos of her in the house. Her belongings had long been given away or thrown out. It was as if he had cut that piece of his life out completely, leaving behind only a clean but visible scar. He never went to her grave, at least, not that Anissa knew of. He'd said it was too painful, that he preferred to remember her alive. Anissa never pushed. She understood that everyone grieves in their own way. But for herself, she decided she had to do this. Not for David, not for the dead woman she'd never met, but for her own peace of mind. To finally close that invisible door. She had taken another woman's place, and even though it had been honest, 2 years after the tragedy, she still sometimes felt like she was living in a house where one room would forever remain locked. By laying flowers on her grave, she would be saying, "I'm here. I respect your past. Now I take care of him." It felt like the right, mature thing to do. The workday passed in a blur of noise and movement, calls, invoices, arguments with department heads, the smell of fabric and machine oil. Here at the factory, she was Anissa Brennan, director, respected professional. Everything made sense here. Everything followed rules and schedules. There was no place for ghosts of the past, but the thought of what she had to do later stayed like a splinter in her mind, and she kept glancing at the clock. At 5, she let her secretary go, packed her papers into her briefcase, and left the office. Instead of heading home, she turned onto the main street and stopped by a flower shop. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of roses. A young florist looked at Anissa curiously. "Can I help you?" "I need white lilies." "For what occasion? A wedding?" "No," Anissa said shortly. "Just a bouquet." She picked 5 large waxy lilies with long stems. The girl wrapped them neatly in brown craft paper. After paying, Anissa stepped outside. A cold wind immediately tried to snatch the bouquet from her hands. She pressed the flowers closer to her gray coat and walked toward her car. The drive to the old city cemetery took about 20 minutes. She drove slowly, as if delaying the moment. The city fell behind. Industrial buildings gave way to small houses, then to open fields. The cemetery was on the outskirts, on a small hill swept by wind from all sides. She parked by the heavy iron gates and got out. Silence surrounded her. Only the wind rustled through the bare branches, and somewhere far away a crow cawed. Anissa had never liked cemeteries. They reeked of hopelessness and forgetting. She didn't know exactly where the grave was. Once early in their relationship, David had mentioned that the McLaughlin family plot was near the entrance, under a big birch tree. She walked along the main path, scanning the rows of graves. Some were old, crooked crosses covered in moss. Others were new, polished black marble with laser-etched portraits. With each step, a strange feeling grew inside her, like she was trespassing somewhere she didn't belong. The bouquet in her hands suddenly felt out of place, almost offensive. Then she saw it. A tall birch tree, its white bark standing out against the dark soil and gray stones. Beneath it were several graves, all enclosed within one low iron fence. A McLaughlin plot. Anissa slowed down, her heartbeat quickened. Kira's grave was the newest one, easy to recognize, well-kept, covered with fresh turf, and marked by a large, solid gray granite headstone. Simple, elegant, unadorned. There were only 3 words engraved on it, Kira McLaughlin, and 2 dates. Anissa stepped closer. A chill crept up her spine. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't say what. The grave looked too well kept, too new for something that should have been there for 5 years. The ground was spotless, not a single fallen leaf, though the rest of the cemetery was carpeted with gold. It looked as if someone had cleaned it only yesterday. She forced herself to take the final step forward and reached out to lay the flowers on the cold stone. Her eyes traced the letters and numbers. First the name, then the birth date. It all matched what David had told her. Then her gaze fell on the second date, the date of death. Her blood froze. Anissa blinked, then blinked again. No, she couldn't be mistaken. The numbers were clear and deep. She read them again, whispering the words silently, but no sound came out. She had expected to see a date from 5 years ago, but what she saw instead was different. It was dated last week, exactly 7 days ago. The world tilted. The air escaped her lungs in a faint hiss. Anissa stumbled backward, her fingers loosening. The bouquet fell, and the heavy waxy lilies hit the cold ground with a dull thud, scattering around the base of the headstone. Anissa didn't remember how she got back to the car. Her legs moved on their own, while her mind tried to reject what her eyes had just seen. She sat behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. Her hands trembled against the steering wheel. She stared straight ahead at the gray crosses and bare branches, but all she could see were those numbers carved into the granite. Last week, a lie. Everything was a lie. 5 years of mourning, grief, sympathy, all built on a lie. The man she shared her bed, her home, her life with, he had lied to her. Lied from the very first day they met. A wave of icy rage rose inside her, so strong it took her breath away. She had to do something. She couldn't just drive away. This madness, this absurdity, she needed proof of it. Otherwise, she'd never believe herself. She'd think she'd lost her mind right there on that cold, damp ground. With trembling hands, she pulled her phone out of her bag. Her fingers wouldn't obey her. She kept missing the camera icon. Finally, she managed to open it. Anissa stepped out of the car, not even feeling the icy wind slicing through her coat, and walked back toward the grave. She moved fast, almost running, afraid the inscription might change, disappear, dissolve like a bad dream. But it was still there, clear, merciless, real. She aimed the camera, trying to keep her hand steady. She took one picture, then another, closer this time, so only the name and dates were visible. And another wider, showing the whole headstone under the birch tree, the white lilies scattered at its base, now streaked with dirt. Proof. She returned to the car, slammed the door, and locked it. Only then did the shock start to release her. Her body shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper. She sat like that for 10 minutes, staring at the photo that shattered her entire life. Then she started the engine and drove home. Home to the apartment that suddenly didn't feel like hers anymore. She drove on autopilot, not noticing the lights or the traffic. One thought kept hammering in her mind. Why? Why would he lie about this? If Kira had died only now, where had she been all those 5 years? And why did David keep lying? What had really happened? The questions multiplied, each more terrifying than the last, and none had an answer. When she walked into the apartment, David was already home. He was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a newspaper, something bubbling gently in a pot on the stove. He looked up and smiled at her, his usual tired after work smile. "Oh, you're home. I thought I'd cooked dinner. You were late." The calmness of it, the cozy, ordinary picture of domestic life, made Anissa feel sick. She silently took off her coat and hung it up. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she were afraid of spilling the rage boiling inside her. "Did something happen?" he asked, putting down the newspaper. His smile faded when he saw her face. "You look pale." Anissa walked into the kitchen and stopped across from him. She didn't raise her voice. She simply took out her phone and handed it to him. "Explain this to me." He looked at her, confused, then at the phone. On the screen was the photo of the granite headstone with the scattered flowers. For a few seconds, David just stared at it. His face changed slowly, confusion giving way to recognition, then to panic. A color drained from his cheeks. He went white as a sheet. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. I was there. Today, Anissa said flatly, her tone lifeless. I went to Lee's Flowers to show respect. I thought it had been 5 years since she passed. That's what you told me, David. 5 years. But on that stone it says last week. What does that mean? He was silent, glancing between her and the phone. His eyes darted like those of a trapped animal. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Talk. Anissa's voice finally sharpened, metal cutting through the air. What the hell is going on? And then he broke. It happened all at once. His strong body seemed to collapse. He slid from the chair to the floor, covering his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. At first it was a low, muffled moan, then it grew into desperate, broken sobs, the kind that come from unbearable grief or unbearable shame. I'm sorry, he sobbed, rocking on the floor. I'm sorry, Anissa. I lied to you. I lied. Please forgive me. Anissa looked down at him, the big, strong man, who now looked small and pitiful, and felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy, only cold, ringing emptiness. I want the truth, she said. It took him a long time to calm down. Anissa poured him a glass of water, and he gulped it down, his teeth clinking against the rim. He still sat on the floor, his back against the kitchen cabinet. Anissa took a seat opposite him and waited. Kira didn't die in that car accident 5 years ago, he began hoarsely, staring at the floor. There was an accident, but she survived. Only, she wasn't really herself afterward. She had some kind of mental breakdown, a complete psychotic collapse. The doctors said the head trauma triggered something that had been dormant in her for years. She became different, dangerous to herself and to others. He spoke slowly, choosing his words, and Anissa listened in silence, trying to catch even a shred of truth in what he said. Her parents insisted we keep it quiet. You know this town, how people here are about things like that. It would have been a stain on all of us, forever. For her, for me, for the whole family. We found a clinic, a very good one, very expensive, in Switzerland. Closed facility, high security, no visitors, no contact with the outside world. Total isolation. To everyone here, she died in that accident. It was easier that way. No questions, no sympathetic stares, no gossip. I buried her alive, Anissa. I put up a headstone over an empty grave. He lifted his eyes to hers, filled with tears and desperation. I met you 2 years later. I fell in love with you, Anissa, and I couldn't tell you. How could I start our relationship with something like that? Hi, I'm David. My wife isn't dead, she's insane and locked away in a clinic across the world. You would have run. Anyone would have. I wanted to protect you, protect our future from all that horror. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath. The story was horrifying, but it carried its own terrible logic. Anissa knew all too well how far powerful, respectable people in their town would go to protect their reputation. And now, she asked quietly, the date on the stone? David lowered his head again. A week ago, the clinic called me. She had a massive stroke. Suddenly, they couldn't save her. She's really gone now. I had to finish it, close it all. I ordered a new stone with the real date. I brought her body home and buried her quietly, alone. That was my goodbye. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to explain one lie without exposing another. Even worse one. I got lost in it all. I just wanted it to finally be over. He began to cry again, softer this time. Exhausted, he crawled toward her on his knees and laid his head in her lap. Please forgive me. I beg you. I love you more than my own life. All that lying, it was about the past. I did it so we could have a future. Anissa sat still, her hand automatically resting on his head. She was in shock, drained, deceived. But somewhere deep inside, she felt something that almost resembled relief. It was horrible, tragic, but it was an explanation. One she could understand, even if it was cowardly and cruel. He hadn't stopped loving her. He hadn't been living a double life. He was just a weak man who'd once made a terrible choice and then couldn't find a way out of it. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him just so this nightmare of a day would finally be over. The evening passed in a haze. They barely spoke. Anissa mechanically reheated the dinner David had made. They ate in silence. He watched her with guilty, dog-like devotion, ready to do anything she asked. She felt wrung out to the last drop. The lie was exposed. The truth, whatever it was, had been told. Now she had to figure out how to live with it. Late at night, after David had fallen asleep under a sedative, Anissa wandered through the quiet apartment. She felt like a stranger in her own home. She gathered the clothes she and David had left on the bedroom chair to take to the laundry. His jacket, her blouse, his trousers. The usual ritual. She started checking the pockets, like she always did. Keys, coins, a handkerchief. In the side pocket of his wool coat, the one he'd worn to work that day, her fingers found a crumpled slip of paper. Probably a gas station or grocery receipt. She pulled it out to throw away. It was a receipt, or rather a card payment slip. She unfolded it under the dim light of the bedside lamp. The paper was thick, expensive. Her eyes skimmed the lines. It wasn't from a Swiss clinic, and not from a funeral home. Across the top, in elegant print, it said, Madison Fur Salon. Anissa felt a chill inside. Madison? Fur? She checked the date. The day before yesterday, 2 days ago. The amount was huge enough to buy a used car. Item, mink coat, women's, model Catalea. And at the very bottom, in the customer's signature box, there was a bold, sweeping signature. For a few seconds, Anissa stared at it, unable to process the familiar letters her brain refused to put together. Then she read it. It wasn't David's name. It was written in a confident woman's hand. K. McLaughlin. The little rectangle of paper felt heavier than lead. Anissa stood in the middle of the bedroom, listening to David's steady breathing through the wall. Sleeping. After his heartbreaking performance, after the tears and the begging for forgiveness, he slept peacefully, drugged up, while she stood here holding proof that it wasn't just lies, it was a well-rehearsed show. The flicker of pity she'd felt back in the kitchen evaporated without a trace. In its place was only cold, ringing fury, not even at the lie itself, but at what he took her for. An idiot, a gullible fool who'd swallow any story about Swiss clinics and sudden strokes, while he bought mink coats for a dead woman. K. McLaughlin. The signature was sure, almost brazen. Ghosts don't sign like that. That's how a woman signs when she gets what she wants. Anissa no longer believed a single word he'd said. His confession, his sobbing on the floor, all of it was part of a game. He wasn't just a liar. He was a pathetic, sloppy liar. The kind of player who leaves the evidence in his own coat pocket. And that made it even more disgusting. She didn't wake him. What would she say? Show him the slip. He'd invent a new story, crazier, more tragic. He'd cry again, beat his chest, and she'd be forced to sit through that circus one more time. No, enough performances. Now she would act. Anissa carefully smoothed the crumpled slip on the vanity. She took her phone, turned on the flashlight for a brighter beam, and photographed it from every angle. Clear, so every letter and number showed. And she just as carefully crumpled it again and slid it back into the pocket of his coat. Let it sit there like a small time bomb. He needed to stay in the dark. He needed to think she was still digesting his bitter truth. The next morning began in silence. Anissa got up earlier than usual and made breakfast. When David came into the kitchen, she set a plate of omelet in front of him without a word. He looked rumpled, his eyes were red and puffy. Good morning, he said softly, with a little appeasing note. Morning, she answered, without looking at him. She sipped her coffee, staring out the window. He felt the chill coming off her right away. He came up behind her and tried to put his arms around her shoulders. Anissa didn't shrug him off, but her whole body went rigid, hard as stone. Anissa, I know this is hard, he began, speaking into the back of her head. What I told you, it's a shock. It takes time to accept, but we'll get through it, together. The important thing is there are no secrets between us now. She turned her head slowly and looked him straight in the eyes. Her gaze was calm, but David stepped back without meaning to. Yes, she said. No more secrets. Eat before it gets cold. I have to get to work. At the factory, the first thing she did was lock herself in her office. Here, within familiar walls, she felt safe. She found an old number in her address book. Marcus Donovan, a distant acquaintance of her father's, a former detective who now ran a small security firm. Old school, quiet, reliable. She hadn't called him in years. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was rough, unsurprised. I'm listening. Marcus, hello. It's Anissa Brennan, Nicholas's daughter. Anissa, I remember. Something wrong? You don't sound festive. I have a job for you. Confidential. Very urgent. Talk, he said curtly. Anissa hesitated for a moment, choosing her words. I need to verify a financial transaction. A purchase made by card. I need everything. Who paid? When? Where exactly? If possible, the surveillance footage. Can that be arranged? Anything can be arranged. Depends on the price and what you've got to start with. I'll pay whatever you ask, Anissa said firmly. I have a photo of the slip. Where can I send it? He dictated an email address. Send it. I'll see what I can do. And, Anissa? Yes? Don't wade into anything yourself. If it stinks, keep your distance. Thank you, Marcus. I'll be careful. She sent the email and felt a small wave of relief. She'd taken a step, set the mechanism in motion. Now all she had to do was wait and play her part. The next few days turned into torture. Sensing her pulling away, David became unbearably attentive. He brought her coffee in bed, bought her favorite pastry, called her at work 5 times a day to ask how she was doing. That sickly sweetness of his care made Anissa nauseous. She knew he was trying to make up for his guilt, but not the guilt he'd confessed to. He was trying to lull her into letting her guard down. You barely talk to me anymore, he said one evening as they sat in the living room. She was reading, and he just watched her. I know you're angry. I deserve that. But this silence, it's killing me. I'm not angry, David. I'm just thinking, she said without looking up from her book. What are you thinking about? Tell me. How fragile the truth is, and how easily it can be broken. He took that as a reference to his made-up confession. We'll fix it, Anissa. I promise. Everything's gonna be okay. She didn't reply. She was just waiting for Marcus's call, but the call didn't come, and the tension kept building. Anissa started to feel like someone was watching her. A few times, when leaving work, she noticed the same dark car parked across the street. She told herself it was nothing, her nerves, her paranoia. On Friday, she stayed late at the factory. When she finally walked out, the sky had already darkened. The street was almost empty. And then she saw her. Across the road, under the streetlight, stood a woman. She was dressed elegantly, a long camel-colored cashmere coat, a neat hat on her head. Her face was hard to see, but everything about her posture radiated confidence and coldness. She wasn't hiding. She just stood there, staring directly at Anissa. Anissa's heart froze. There was something hauntingly familiar about the woman. Something in the way she held herself, the tilt of her head. David had destroyed every photo of Kira, but Anissa had seen a few old pictures in his parents' albums. And now, she could swear this woman looked exactly like her. The woman didn't blink. Her gaze was steady, icy, assessing. Not the look of a stranger passing by. The look of a predator studying its prey. Anissa froze, unable to move or look away. Cold spread through her body. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, but to Anissa it felt like an eternity. Then a taxi pulled up beside the woman. She opened the back door slowly, threw one last long look at Anissa, and got inside. The car drove off and disappeared around the corner. Anissa stood there for a long time, staring at the empty spot. Was that her? No, impossible. That was madness. Her imagination. Her fears taking shape. She forced herself to take a deep breath and walked to her car, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The whole evening she felt on edge. The image of the woman under the streetlight wouldn't leave her mind. David tried to talk to her, but she answered briefly, saying she was tired. She felt drained, hollow. All she wanted was to lie down and sleep, to sink into darkness where there was no fear, no lies. She took a shower, put on her nightgown, and went into the bedroom. David was in the living room watching TV. The only light in the room came from the bedside lamp, casting a soft, cozy glow. Everything seemed normal. She walked to the bed to turn down the covers. And froze. On her snow-white pillow, perfectly centered, lay a glove. Just one, neatly placed, as if just taken off a hand. It was made of fine, expensive black leather, long up to the elbow. A woman's glove. Anissa had never seen that glove in her life, and she certainly didn't own one like it. Someone had been here, in their bedroom, on her bed, and had left this behind like a calling card. A message. A warning. She stared at the black glove lying on her pillow. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The first wave of shock passed, leaving behind a sharp, ringing emptiness. Someone had been here, in her home. In her room, touching her things. That thought felt more disgusting than fear itself. She didn't touch the glove. She just turned and walked out, closing the bedroom door behind her as if trapping a venomous snake inside. David was sitting in the living room, relaxed, watching a sports program. The loud, cheerful voice of the commentator cut through Anissa's frayed nerves like a knife. She walked up to the TV and pressed the power button. The screen went black. Silence filled the room. David looked up at her, surprised. "Anissa, what's wrong?" "Stand up," she said quietly, but in a tone that didn't allow disobedience. He stood, frowning, confused. "We need to talk." She led him not to the kitchen but to the hallway, away from the bedroom. She didn't want that conversation happening near what was lying on her pillow. "Someone's been in the apartment," she said, looking straight into his eyes, searching for even the smallest flicker of deceit, the tiniest tell. His face showed genuine shock. "What do you mean? How? The door was locked." "I don't know how, but someone was here, and they left a message in our bedroom, on my pillow." He frowned. Concern flickered in his eyes. "What kind of message?" "Let's go see." "No," she cut him off. "You'll go alone, and I'll be watching you." He hesitated for a moment, then straightened up and walked toward the bedroom. Anissa stayed by the doorway, watching. She watched him walk to the bed and saw his eyes fall on the pillow. He froze, just stood there, staring at the glove. There was no surprise on his face, no fear, only a kind of heavy, dull resignation, as if he was seeing something he'd been expecting all along. He turned to her slowly. "I don't know what this is," he said. His voice was flat. "I have no idea." "Really?" Anissa let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a cough. "You don't know? A luxury women's glove shows up in a locked apartment, and you have no idea what it is?" "Maybe you forgot to lock the door," he said, his tone turning pleading. "Maybe someone made a mistake. Got the wrong apartment? There are crazy people everywhere." "Stop, David," she cut him off. "Just stop. I've had enough of your stories." She turned and walked out to the kitchen. She heard him pick up the glove, heard the faint rustle of movement. A minute later, he came in behind her, holding the glove between two fingers like it was a dead rat. "I'll throw it away," he said. "We change the locks tomorrow. I'll call someone. Everything will be fine, Anissa. It's just some stupid, cruel prank." She stared at him, at his pitiful attempts to look like he had things under control. And in that moment, she understood completely. He wasn't just part of the lie. He was a pawn, a weak, cowardly pawn in someone else's game. And whoever was playing that game was now openly laughing at both of them. The next day was the city's annual banquet for industry leaders hosted by the mayor's office. Attendance was mandatory. As the factory director, Anissa had to be there. The thought of dressing up, smiling, pretending everything was fine was unbearable. "I'm not going," she told David in the morning. "You have to," he said softly but firmly. "Anissa, we have to go, especially now. We need to show everyone we're fine. If we don't show up, people will start talking. Please, for me, for us." She knew his words were driven by fear, but there was some logic to them too. Hiding would mean surrendering, and Anissa Brennan never surrendered without a fight. "Fine," she said through clenched teeth. "We'll go." She spent the day on autopilot, giving orders, signing documents, while her mind stayed elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the camel coat, the black glove. They were connected, pieces of one chain, slowly tightening around her. That evening, as she got ready for the banquet, she chose her outfit like armor. Nothing soft, nothing gentle. She put on a fitted dark green dress, modest but sharp, that clung to her like a second skin. She pulled her hair into a tight bun and applied flawless makeup that hid the dark circles under her eyes. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger, a woman with a hard, cold stare. The drive to the restaurant was silent. David gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. He was terrified, and his fear gave her a strange, bitter strength. The banquet hall buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Crystal chandeliers glittered, glasses clinked, laughter and chatter filled the air. The city's elite were all there, the mayor, officials, factory directors, businessmen with their diamond-covered wives. Anissa took a deep breath and entered the room with her head held high, feeling curious eyes follow her. David walked beside her, trying to appear confident, but his nervous energy gave him away. They shook hands, exchanged smiles, said meaningless, polite phrases. Anissa played her part flawlessly, discussing tax reforms with the steelworks director, accepting compliments on her dress from the mayor's wife. She was an iceberg, calm and cold on the surface, while underneath, everything boiled with tension and dread. It was the moment she let herself breathe, reaching for a glass of champagne from a waiter's tray, that she saw her. An older woman was making her way toward them. She moved slowly, but with unstoppable force, like an icebreaker through a frozen sea. and people instinctively stepped aside for her. She wore an old-fashioned but expensive dark velvet dress. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her face was like a carved ivory mask, a mask of cold, concentrated fury. Anissa recognized her instantly. She had seen her in the old family photos. It was Rhonda McLaughlin, Kira's mother. David saw her too. He froze, the glass in his hand trembling. His face turned pale. "Mom." "Rhonda," he stammered as the woman came up to them. She didn't even look at him. Her full attention was locked on Anissa. Her small, faded eyes burned right through her. For a moment, the hall went silent. The people nearby sensed the tension and turned to watch. Then Rhonda McLaughlin raised her hand and pointed a trembling, jewel-covered finger straight at Anissa. Her voice, loud and shrill like a rusted hinge, cut through the hum of the room. "Vulture!" The word hit like a slap. A ring of silence formed around them instantly. Every conversation stopped. Dozens, no, hundreds of eyes turned toward them. "Look at her." Rhonda shouted, her voice shaking with hatred. She preyed on a grieving man. "Took another woman's bed, another woman's home, while my poor sick Kira was fighting for her life in a clinic. This predator was stealing her husband." The scandal was instant, crushing, public. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a verdict, delivered in front of the entire city. Anissa stood frozen, her cheeks burning. She looked at David, searching for support, for protection, for something. But he just stood there, paralyzed, his mouth slightly open, his eyes darting between his mother-in-law, the guests, and Anissa. He didn't say a word, didn't move, didn't do a thing to defend his wife. He just let it happen. The humiliation was absolute. Anissa couldn't take it anymore. She turned and walked toward the exit without looking back. Her steps were quick, steady, her spine straight. Behind her, the noise of voices grew like an avalanche. She didn't run. She was retreating from the battlefield, refusing to let the enemy see her tears. The next day, the factory was wrapped in uneasy silence. People avoided her gaze, greeted her too quickly, then turned away. News traveled faster than wildfire in their town. She sat in her office, trying to work, but the lines of text blurred before her eyes. She felt filthy, shamed. Around noon, her secretary knocked on the door. "Anissa, there's a package for you. A courier just brought it." "Leave it," Anissa said curtly. On her desk lay a plain, thick paper envelope. No return address, no markings, just her name, printed neatly on a label. She picked up a letter opener and sliced it open. Inside was a single photograph, glossy, in color. Their wedding portrait, the one that had stood in the living room in a silver frame. She and David, happy and smiling, looking into the camera. A memory of the day she'd thought marked the beginning of a new, honest life. But something was wrong. She brought the photo closer to the light and her blood turned to ice. David's face was untouched, but her face had been completely destroyed. Someone had taken a sharp object, a blade, a needle, and carefully, viciously carved it out. Where her smile and eyes had been was now a jagged, ugly wound, a scar slashed across glossy paper. Her fingers tightened around the photo so hard that the edges dug into her skin. Those ragged scratches weren't just vandalism. They were a message. Clear, merciless. You don't exist. You're nothing. And in that moment, any hope that this was some horrible misunderstanding vanished. This was war, declared silently, but fought with ruthless precision. She didn't throw the photo away. She carefully locked it in her desk drawer. It was evidence. Another piece in the growing collection, the glove, the fur coat receipt, and now, her mutilated face. She looked down at her hands. They weren't trembling. Last night, after the scandal, she'd felt humiliated and powerless. Now she felt only cold, calculated fury. And fury gave her strength. They were trying to erase her. First, from society turning her into a public joke. Now from her own life, her own past. What would be next? Throwing her out on the street with nothing? A thought hit like an electric shock. Money. Her money. She'd worked her whole life. Since 18, back when she was still in college, she'd worked part-time at a tailor shop. Later, she got a job at the factory as a seamstress, worked her way up to forewoman, then department head, and for the past 3 years, she'd been the director. She'd always relied on herself. Even after marrying David, that never changed. Every month, she put aside a significant part of her salary into their joint savings account. Her safety net, her guarantee of independence. She had told David that the money was for the future, for factory expansion, for new Italian equipment. He'd always agreed, nodding, praising her for being smart and forward-thinking. Now that account burned in her mind. If they were destroying her step by step, the money would be their first target. David, with his sob story about debts and the Swiss clinic, was the perfect pawn. She had to act. Now, she called her best friend Janet, the factory's HR manager. The only person she could trust right now? Janet, hey, I need to step out for a couple of hours. Cover for me, okay? Anissa, what happened? After yesterday, I called you, but you didn't answer. Are you all right? Janet's voice was full of worry. I'm not, Anissa said flatly, but now's not the time to talk. Just tell anyone who asks that I'm at a meeting at City Hall. Got it. Hang in there, friend. She grabbed her bag and left the office. In the reception area, her secretary looked up, curiosity and thinly disguised pity in her eyes. Anissa walked past without even glancing at her. In the factory corridors, whispers died the moment she appeared and flared back up the second she passed. She could feel their stares, hear the murmurs behind her. Did you hear about Brennan? They say the first wife's been alive this whole time. And her mother? Did you see what she did to her? Her world, so solid and structured, was collapsing before her eyes. Every step through the factory felt like walking across burning coals. The drive to the bank felt endless. She tried to calm herself, to believe she was overreacting. David couldn't have done that. He wouldn't dare touch her money, her savings. That would be more than deceit. It would be theft, betrayal at its lowest. But deep down, she already knew the truth. The bank was cool and quiet. Only 2 tellers were working. Anissa took a number and sat down on a hard plastic chair, staring at the digital board, at the faceless changing numbers, thinking that her entire life now depended on numbers just like those, numbers on a bank screen. Client number 47, please proceed to window 2, said the emotionless, automated voice. Anissa walked up to the counter. A young clerk greeted her with a polite smile. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Hello, I'd like to check the balance of my savings account and withdraw some funds. She handed over her ID and card. The clerk typed for a few seconds, frowning slightly at the monitor. The smile slowly faded from her face. She looked up at Anissa with a hesitant, almost sympathetic expression. Anissa Brennan? Yes. The girl hesitated, glanced back at the screen, then at Anissa again. I'm sorry, but there's almost nothing left in your account. Anissa felt the ground tilt beneath her. She gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. What do you mean nothing? That's impossible. Check again. There should be a large sum there. I can see that, the clerk said quietly, lowering her voice. But 3 days ago, nearly the entire balance was withdrawn. Only a small amount remains. 3 days ago. That was before the banquet. Before the public humiliation. They've been preparing this. Who made the withdrawal? Anissa's voice was barely audible. The account is joint with David Brennan. He has full access to make transactions, just like you. I want to see the withdrawal document, the transaction slip, right now. The girl nodded nervously and disappeared into the back office. Anissa stood there, staring into nothing. Her ears rang. Everything felt distant, muffled, like a slow, terrible dream. A few minutes later, the clerk returned with a printed page and set it silently on the counter. It was the withdrawal form. The amount was written out in numbers and words, the same sum she had saved for almost 3 years. The date 3 days ago. And at the bottom, under received by, was a large confident signature. David Brennan. She took her ID and card without a word and walked out into the blinding daylight. Sitting in her car, she gripped the steering wheel and stared blankly ahead. It was over. Her safety net was gone. Her money, her work, her future, everything she built had been stolen. On the way home, Anissa felt nothing, only a cold, hollow emptiness. The anger had burned out, leaving behind nothing but ashes. When she walked into the apartment, David was there. He met her in the hallway with a guilty smile. You're home early. Something happened at work? Anissa walked past him without a word and went straight to the kitchen. She set her bag down, pulled out the bank statement she'd taken with her just in case, and laid it on the table. Where's the money, David? He looked at the paper and his face changed instantly. He understood she knew, but even now, he didn't give up. He decided to keep playing his part to the end. Anissa, I was going to tell you, he stammered, avoiding her eyes. I just didn't know how. Where is the money? She repeated, every word sharp as ice. He took a deep breath and looked up at her with eyes full of sorrow, playing the martyr. I paid the debt, the last one, the biggest, for Kira's clinic for all those 5 years. They sent the final bill. It was astronomical. I didn't want to drag you into it, didn't want to burden you with more than you've already had to deal with. Things have been hard enough for us lately. I thought I'd handle it on my own, then explain later. I just wanted to protect you from all of it. His voice was smooth, convincing. The story sounded perfectly logical. A massive debt from an expensive Swiss clinic. It explained everything. Anyone else might have believed him, might have pretended to believe. But Anissa looked at him and saw only a liar, a shameless, pathetic liar. She said nothing, just stared at him with such quiet contempt that he finally looked away. Then she turned and walked into the bedroom, locking the door behind her. She sat on the bed and took out her phone. There was only one person who could help her now. She dialed Janet. Janet, it's me. I'm in trouble. She spoke quickly, without emotion, about the empty account, the missing money, David's story about paying off the clinic. I don't believe him, she finished. Not a word. And you're right not to, Janet said firmly. What kind of debt? If that clinic really existed, they wouldn't wait 5 years to send a bill. Listen, my cousin works at a big real estate agency. They know about every major deal in the city, especially the ones paid in cash. Big sums don't go unnoticed. Give me an hour. I'll call him. Anissa spent that hour pacing the room. She heard David come to the bedroom door several times, calling her softly, but she didn't answer. Finally, the phone rang. It was Janet, Anissa. Her voice was tight, strained. Are you sitting down? Just tell me. My cousin found something. 3 days ago, there was a big cash transaction. Really big. Janet hesitated for a moment. Janet, don't drag it out. They rented an apartment, Janet blurted out. A luxury one. In a new building on the other side of town. Paid in cash. For the whole year in advance. They? Silence. Anissa held the phone to her ear. Janet's words didn't just shock her. They shattered something inside. All the pain, humiliation, and fear of the last few days condensed into one hard, cold knot of rage. It was pure, blinding anger that pushed out everything else. No more questions, no more doubts, only one goal. To see. To see with her own eyes what her money had been used for. To see who was living in luxury off her work and trust. Anissa, are you there? Janet's voice was anxious. What are you going to do? Don't do anything stupid. Give me the address, Anissa said. Her voice was calm, eerily, dangerously calm. Why? Don't go there. It's not safe. Janet, the address, Anissa repeated. The steel in her tone made Janet go silent. Janet dictated the street and building number. Anissa hung up. She stood, opened the bedroom door. David was still in the kitchen, slumped over, his head in his hands. When he looked up at her, his eyes were full of hope and fear. Anissa, please. We need to talk. I'll explain everything. No, she interrupted. There's nothing left to explain. She walked to the hallway, took her coat from the hanger and put it on. Picked up her bag. Every movement was precise, deliberate, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Where are you going? Panic crept into his voice. He jumped up and ran toward her. Don't go. Let's just talk this out, please. She looked at him like he was nothing. Like he didn't even exist. Without a word, she opened the front door and walked out, leaving him standing there in the middle of the hallway, stunned. A new residential complex was across the river, in the city's most expensive neighborhood. Tall glass towers, fenced-in grounds, security at the entrance. Anissa parked her car on the street and walked through the gate, which luckily was open. She entered a spacious lobby lined with marble. The concierge, in a crisp uniform cap, looked up questioningly. Who are you here to see? Anissa said without thinking. The name slipped out on its own. Which apartment? The concierge checked the list. Kira McLaughlin, penthouse, 16th floor. Elevator to your right. Anissa's heart skipped a beat. Kira McLaughlin, not Rhonda. Her, the one supposedly buried under a granite headstone. She was here. Alive. Anissa stepped into the silent, mirrored elevator. As it rose, she stared at her reflection. Her pale face, her burning eyes. She didn't know what she would say. She didn't know what she would do. She was just on her way to meet the ghost that had stolen her life. The 16th floor had only one door, massive, paneled in dark wood with a gleaming brass handle. No number. The penthouse. Anissa took a deep breath to steady her racing heart and pressed the doorbell. She had prepared herself for anything, for no one to answer, for a housekeeper, or even for a stranger to open the door. She was ready for every possibility, almost every one. Seconds dragged like hours. Then she heard quiet footsteps on the other side. A lock clicked. The door opened smoothly, soundlessly, and there she was. The woman? The same one Anissa had seen standing under the streetlight. But now she wasn't wearing a hat or a coat. She was dressed in an elegant emerald green silk robe that shimmered softly under the light. Her glossy dark hair was perfectly styled, her face flawless, makeup subtle but precise. She looked healthy, well-rested, radiant. Beautiful in that dangerous, self-assured way that only sharpened with age. This was Kira McLaughlin. Alive. Real. She didn't look surprised. A faint, knowing smile played on her lips as she regarded Anissa with a gaze full of cold, unhidden triumph. "So you finally figured it out," she said calmly. Her voice was low, with a husky edge, confident, amused, slightly mocking. "Come in. Don't just stand there. Or, on second thought, maybe standing suits you." Anissa couldn't speak. The air caught in her throat. The world shrank to this woman in a silk robe, standing in the doorway of the apartment bought with her money. Every puzzle piece, Kira's fake death, the fur coat receipt, the glove on the pillow, the public humiliation, the emptied bank account, all came together into one horrifying, crystal-clear picture. This wasn't just deceit. It was a calculated, step-by-step eviction from her own life. And the conductor of this cruel symphony was standing right in front of her. "Don't take it personally," Kira went on lazily, leaning against the doorframe. "It's nothing emotional, just business. David was simply keeping my place warm for me, and for the bed, too. You've done a decent job as a temporary caretaker, but your lease is up." Every word dripped like venom, slow and deliberate. Anissa stared at her, and the full weight of reality crashed down. The man she had loved wasn't just a liar, he was a partner in all of it. He had lived a double life all these years, playing the loyal husband while his dead wife waited in the shadows. Just as she was trying to breathe, to say something, to let out the fury boiling inside her, she heard the soft chime of the elevator behind her. The doors opened. David stood there. In one hand, he held a large paper bag from the city's most expensive gourmet store, a baguette and a bunch of greens poking out from the top. In the other, a net bag filled with oranges. He looked up and saw them. Two women, face to face in the doorway, and his expression froze into a mask of gray horror. The grocery bag slipped from his hand. The wine bottle inside shattered with a dull thud, and a dark red pool spread across the marble floor. His eyes darted between Anissa and Kira. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping on dry land. He was caught, stupidly, pathetically caught. Anissa braced herself for shouting, for accusations, for a scene. She expected Kira to lash out at David for bringing his temporary caretaker to her doorstep. But Kira didn't even raise her voice. She looked at the bewildered, pitiful man with faint disgust and disappointment, like a servant who'd broken his mistress's favorite vase. Then she smiled. She stepped forward gracefully, ignoring the broken glass and the spilled wine, and slipped her arm through David's. Resting her head lightly on his shoulder, she looked straight into Anissa's eyes. "You're late, darling," she purred, and our guest was just about to leave. Anissa stared at them, Kira clinging possessively to David's arm. David frozen in guilt and fear. Kira's words, "our guest was just about to leave," hung in the air, final and humiliating, like a verdict. She didn't belong here, not anymore. She wasn't just unwanted. She was an inconvenience, something to be removed. She didn't speak. What was there to say? To scream? To accuse? That's what they wanted. That would give them satisfaction. Instead, Anissa turned silently toward the elevator, stepping carefully around the puddle of wine and shards of glass, like someone avoiding the scene of a crime. She pressed the call button. Behind her, the silence was absolute. She could feel their eyes on her, the mocking, victorious stare of Kira, and the desperate, pleading one of David. The elevator doors opened. Anissa stepped inside without turning back. As the doors began to close, she caught one last glimpse of them, standing together amid the chaos they had created, already part of their perfect little world. A world she no longer belonged to. She drove home, but the word had lost its meaning. That place wasn't hers, it never had been. She had only been living there temporarily, a caretaker without realizing it. Every single object, the couch they'd picked out together, the painting they'd bought on vacation, even the coffee cup she used each morning, all of it now looked like part of a well-staged set. When she entered the apartment, she went straight to the bedroom, opened the closet. His clothes hung neatly beside hers, shirts, suits, sweaters. Without hesitation, she began pulling them out and throwing them to the floor. Her movements were calm, deliberate. First the clothes, then his shoes from the hallway, then his toiletries from the bathroom. Everything that belonged to him, everything that carried his scent, his presence, became one enormous pile in the middle of the living room. She found 2 old suitcases in the storage closet and began quietly, carefully packing his life into them. The clothes she had thrown down earlier, she smoothed out. Suits went on hangers, which she folded neatly inside the cases too. There was no love in her movements. No hate either, only cold, surgical precision. She was cutting him out of her life, amputating him. It took her almost 2 hours. When the last suitcase was zipped shut, she pushed them out onto the landing. Then she found the number of a 24-hour locksmith service. "I need to change the lock on my front door immediately," she said into the phone. "The sooner the better." The locksmith arrived 40 minutes later. While he worked on the door, Anissa sat in the kitchen drinking a glass of water. She didn't feel anything, not grief, not anger. Just a strange, ringing emptiness, and at the same time, a solid certainty that she was doing the right thing. The only right thing. When the locksmith finished and handed her the new set of keys, she felt the first small wave of relief wash over her. She locked the door twice, turning the key with slow, firm clicks. This was her space now. Her fortress, even if temporary. David showed up close to midnight. She heard him trying his key in the lock. Once, twice. Then he began rattling the handle. Finally, he knocked hesitantly. Anissa stared at the door but didn't move. "Anissa!" His voice was muffled and pitiful through the wood. "Please, open the door. I can explain. It's not what you think." She said nothing. "Anissa, I'm begging you. Just let me take my things. Please, talk to me." She walked up to the door. "Your things are on the landing," she said loudly and clearly. "You can drop the keys in the mailbox. Nothing else in this apartment belongs to you anymore." Silence. Then she heard him picking up the suitcases. The slow, heavy sound of footsteps going down the stairs. And then nothing. He was gone. That night, for the first time in a long while, she slept peacefully. She had lost her husband, lost all her savings, had her reputation dragged through the mud. But by throwing him out, she had taken back the one thing that mattered most, herself. She was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow. She was a player now, and she was ready for her opponent's next move. It didn't take long. The next morning, barely after Anissa arrived at the factory and walked into her office, her secretary rushed in nervously. "Anissa, you have a visitor. She didn't make an appointment, but she insists on seeing you." "Who?" Anissa asked, though she already knew the answer. The door opened without a knock. Kira McLaughlin stood on the threshold. She wore a perfectly tailored cream-colored business suit, looking every bit like a woman arriving at her own company. Kira stepped inside, her eyes sweeping across the office with mild curiosity as if evaluating the decor. "Not bad," she said, running a manicured finger across the polished desk. "Cozy, though a bit tasteless. But then again, what else could one expect?" She sat down in the visitor's chair without being invited, crossed one leg over the other, radiating confidence and superiority. "I'm not here to fight," she began in a businesslike tone. "Just to clarify some legal matters. You're a practical woman, Anissa, a factory director. You should understand the language of facts, not emotions." Anissa sat down behind her desk silently, her eyes fixed on Kira, bracing for the hit. "I spoke to an excellent lawyer yesterday," Kira continued, examining her perfect nails. "And he confirmed what I already knew. Funny thing, really. I was never legally declared dead. There was no death certificate, no court ruling. Just, let's say, a family arrangement." She looked up, meeting Anissa's eyes. There was cold poison in her gaze. "And since I was never legally dead, my marriage to David was never dissolved. It's still valid. Always has been." Kira paused, letting the words sink in. "And that means," she went on slowly, savoring every word, "that your marriage, your ceremony, your photos, the stamp in your passport, is nothing. Legally void. You're not his wife, Anissa. You're his mistress. His long-term live-in girlfriend. Nothing more." She smiled, a dazzling, cruel smile. Anissa felt a wave of icy numbness crawl up from inside her. Mistress, that's what she'd been all this time without knowing it. A woman with no rights, no standing. I can see you don't believe me, Kira said, noticing the look on her face. Think I'm bluffing? She reached into her expensive leather bag, pulled out a folded document, and tossed it casually onto the desk. Here, to clear your doubts, the original. Anissa's hand trembled as she picked it up. It was printed on thick, official paper, slightly yellowed with age. She unfolded it. It was a marriage certificate. The names were there, David Brennan and Kira McLaughlin. The date 15 years ago. Every stamp, every signature perfectly in place. The document was genuine, unquestionable, and it carried more legal weight than her own certificate, now nothing more than a useless piece of paper. Anissa stared at it lying on her desk. That yellowed sheet wasn't just a document. It was a weapon, and Kira had just fired it straight into her heart. Everything Anissa had built her life on, her marriage, her family, her sense of self, had just been exposed as a lie. Kira watched her reaction with obvious satisfaction. She saw the color drain from Anissa's face, saw her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair, like she was holding on for life. Well, now you understand, don't you? Kira said, standing up. She calmly picked up the marriage certificate from the desk, folded it, and tucked it back into her handbag. If I were you, I'd start packing, both at work and at home. Nothing here belongs to you anymore. She turned and walked toward the door, her heels tapping out a sharp, victorious rhythm on the parquet floor. At the threshold, she paused and, without looking back, tossed over her shoulder. Oh, and one more thing. David sends his regards. He's terribly sorry about everything, but family is family. The door closed behind her, leaving Anissa alone in a deafening silence. She sat still for several minutes, staring at the empty spot on the desk where the document that had just destroyed her life had lain. The shock was so deep she couldn't think. But slowly, the icy paralysis began to fade, replaced by anger, not hysterical, but cold and clear. She wasn't going to let them destroy her. She would fight. The first thing she needed was a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best family law expert in the city. Anissa opened her laptop and started searching. One name appeared again and again on every forum. Tyler Goldman. Expensive, cynical, brilliant. Exactly what she needed. She called his office and, to her surprise, managed to get an appointment the same day. Apparently, the title factory director still carried some weight. Goldman's office was in an old downtown building that looked more like a private library than a law firm. The walls were lined with books in leather bindings. Goldman himself was a short, stocky man in his 60s with intelligent, weary eyes. He listened to her carefully, not interrupting, only occasionally jotting something down in his notebook. Anissa told him everything, from the fake death to David's lies about the clinic, from the mysterious fur coat receipt and the glove on her pillow to the public scandal, and finally, Kira's visit that morning with the marriage certificate. She spoke calmly, without tears, giving him only facts. When she finished, Goldman leaned back in his heavy leather chair and sat in silence for a while, tapping his pen against the desk. Yes, Anissa, he said at last, with a deep sigh. You've got yourself a nightmare. Legally speaking, it couldn't be worse. But what they did is a crime, Anissa protested. They faked a death. That's fraud. Absolutely, Goldman nodded. Fraud, conspiracy, falsification of identity. Sounds good in theory, but try proving it. You said David confessed, right? He did. He told me everything. He told you in your kitchen, Goldman corrected gently. No witnesses, no recording. And now, as I understand it, he's on her side. So what will he say in court? He'll say you misunderstood, that you're just a bitter, abandoned woman trying to get revenge. And Kira, she'll present herself as the victim. She'll say it was all David's idea. He believed she was terminally ill and tried to move on. Meanwhile, poor Kira spent 5 years in a private clinic, never knowing her husband had remarried. So tell me, in this picture, who do you think the judge and this oh-so-moral city will see as the villain? His words were brutal but true, and Anissa knew it. So, my marriage really is invalid? With 99% certainty, yes, Goldman confirmed. The law favors the first marriage if it was never legally dissolved. Yours will be ruled null and void. At best, the court might recognize you as a good faith spouse, someone who didn't know and couldn't have known about the legal obstacle. But in reality, that means nothing. You're not his wife, Anissa, and you never were. Will David face any punishment? For bigamy? There's no criminal charge for that here. Goldman said with a shrug. At most, a fine, maybe some public shaming, but your biggest problem isn't that. Once the court invalidates your marriage, this city will brand you as the woman who married a married man. No one will care that you didn't know. For our provincial society, that's as good as social death. Anissa closed her eyes. The trap had finally shut. She was cornered. No money, no status, her reputation in ruins. What am I supposed to do now? She asked quietly. Fight, Goldman said firmly. Fight for what can still be saved. Your property. The thought gave Anissa a flicker of strength. Yes, they had taken everything from her, but there was still the apartment. Her home. The place she had furnished, lived in, built with her own hands. She wouldn't give it up without a fight. The apartment we lived in, it was bought after our wedding. I invested money in it. Paid for renovations. My name is in the ownership papers. I remember signing them. That should count for something, right? For the first time during their meeting, Goldman's face showed interest. Now that's something we can work with. Your name is on both the purchase agreement and the ownership certificate. Yes, I'm sure of it. That changes everything. If you're listed as a co-owner, you have legal rights. They can't evict you just like that. It'll turn into a long, complicated property dispute. And that gives us time and leverage. He picked up the phone. Jenny, get me the registrar's office. Yes, the head of property records. Tell him it's Goldman. Urgent. While he waited, Anissa felt the first spark of hope she'd had in days. This was it, her lifeline, her name on the document, something they couldn't erase. Robert, good afternoon, Goldman said when the line connected, his tone turning sharp and authoritative. This is Tyler Goldman. I need immediate information on a property. Yes, completely confidential. Address? Anissa dictated her address, and Goldman repeated it into the receiver. I need full ownership history, who's listed, how rights were transferred, current status. Right now, please. I'll hold. He fell silent, listening. Anissa held her breath, watching his face for clues. At first, his expression stayed neutral. Then his brow furrowed. He scribbled something quickly on his notepad. How before the marriage? He said into the phone, and Anissa's stomach dropped. Repeat the registration date, please. He wrote it down. Then another note. I see. Thank you, Robert. I owe you one. He slowly set the phone down, glanced over his notes, then lifted his eyes to Anissa. His expression was heavy with pity, the kind doctors wear when they have to deliver bad news. Anissa, he said quietly, I have some very bad news. What is it? She whispered. The apartment, it really is registered under 2 owners, but you're not one of them. What do you mean, not me? He sighed deeply. The property was purchased and registered as joint ownership between David Brennan and Kira McLaughlin, 2 months before their supposed divorce, and 2 years before your wedding to David. Anissa stared at him blankly, unable to process the words. That's impossible. I signed the papers. Most likely, Goldman said gently. You signed as a spouse giving consent for a transaction David made after your wedding. Maybe he was selling or buying something else. Your signature was a formality, but your name was never entered into the ownership documents for that apartment. You've been living in a home that's legally half hers. Kira isn't just his lawful wife, she's the legal co-owner of your house. She can have you evicted by court order whenever she wants. Anissa walked out of Goldman's office, but she didn't feel the air or the chill of the autumn wind. She moved as if through thick, airless fog. Goldman's words, she's the legal co-owner of your house, rang in her head like a funeral bell. She had been living in someone else's home. Sleeping in someone else's bed. She wasn't just a mistress, she was an imposter, an intruder who had taken another woman's place. And now she would be thrown out like a stray dog. The flicker of hope she'd felt moments before went out. Kira had thought of everything, every move, every step. She had left Anissa with no chance, no loophole. She had trapped her in a cage of lies and legal facts and was now slowly, almost pleasurably, tightening the bars. But taking Anissa's husband, money, and home wasn't enough for Kira. She wanted total destruction. She wanted to grind Anissa into the dirt, to drag her name through public shame, to turn her into a pariah. And in their small provincial city, Kira had the most powerful weapon possible, public opinion. The campaign to erase Anissa Brennan began the very next day, orchestrated with the precision of a general leading a war. The main voices of that campaign were Kira herself and her mother, Rhonda McLaughlin. They chose 2 perfect battlegrounds for spreading gossip, the local market, and the church parish. Places where news mixed with moral outrage and tears spread faster than wildfire. Kira played the role of the tragic heroine. She appeared in the most crowded places, the best bakery, the pharmacy, the post office, always impeccably dressed, with a sad but dignified smile. She never shouted or accused anyone directly. She simply told her story in a soft, trembling voice, just loud enough for everyone in line to hear. The story of her miraculous recovery from a long, mysterious illness that had cut her off from the world for 5 years. The story of her long-awaited, joyful return home and the terrible shock that awaited her there. Another woman living in her house, in her bed, beside her husband. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Kira never mentioned Anissa's name. She only said, "That woman, the intruder, the one who took advantage of my husband's grief." It was far more effective that way. She created the image of a faceless, predatory usurper, and the townspeople's imagination filled in the rest. If Kira was the playwright, then her mother, Rhonda, was the heavy artillery. She didn't bother with subtlety. At the market, while picking vegetables, she would loudly tell her friends and anyone within earshot horrible things. She claimed Anissa had known everything from the start. That she knew Kira was alive and ill, and had deliberately seduced David, exploiting his weakness. "She's a factory director, sharp as a blade," Rhonda would say, shaking a bunch of dill in the air for emphasis. "You think she didn't check everything before dragging him to the altar? Please. She saw a rich man, with property, with status, and she latched on like a leech. And his dying wife? That only made it easier for her. The poison worked perfectly. It was a small town, everyone knew everyone. And in this fight, David, Kira, and her mother were insiders. Old, respected families. Anissa, despite her position, had always been an outsider. She'd come to the city after college, built her career from scratch, without connections or favors. People had always envied her a little. Now they had the perfect excuse to let that envy loose, dressed up as moral outrage. She felt it immediately. First at work, employees who just yesterday smiled at her with flattery now avoided her eyes in the hallway and hurried past. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Her orders were followed, but without enthusiasm, with a hint of quiet defiance. She had become a stranger in her own company. Then it spilled into the streets. Acquaintances would spot her in a store, pretend not to notice, and cross to the other side. The barista at her favorite cafe, who used to chat cheerfully, now served her in silence, her face like stone. Anissa found herself in complete social isolation. People were afraid to be seen with her, as if shame were contagious. Then came the phone calls. Old family friends of the McLaughlins and the Brennans, mostly women, began to call. They didn't yell. Their voices were cold, polite, condescending. "Anissa, we've always respected you," said the wife of the city's chief architect. "We understand matters of the heart are complicated, but now that Kira's back, you need to do the right thing. Step aside quietly. Don't drag this through the courts or cause more scandal. Think of David. Think of Kira. They've suffered enough." Each call hit like a punch to the stomach. The whole town had already passed judgment. She was guilty. Guilty for being deceived. Guilty simply for existing. The pressure was unbearable. Every night, she returned to her cold, empty apartment, a place that could be taken from her at any moment, and felt utterly alone. The only person who stayed by her side was Janet. She called every day, offering support, bringing groceries so Anissa wouldn't have to face the hostile streets. "Hang in there," Janet told her. "It's all noise, it'll die down. Focus on work. As long as you have the factory, you have power. They can't touch you there." Anissa clung to her work like a lifeline. The factory was her world, her domain. Here, she was still the director. Here, hundreds of people still depended on her. She buried herself in contracts and production schedules, trying to build a wall between herself and the nightmare her life had become. She thought her professional reputation earned through years of flawless work was untouchable. She was wrong. The next blow came from where she least expected it. One morning, her secretary called. "Anissa, Mr. Coulter from the Regional Trade Council is asking you to come to his office right away." The Trade Council wasn't just a client, it was the client, their biggest partner. Through them came all the major government and regional contracts for uniformed schools, hospitals, municipal services. A multi-year partnership. Anissa felt a sick twist in her stomach. Coulter was an old-school serious man. He didn't call urgent meetings for nothing. She drove to the administration building. Coulter received her in his enormous office with an American flag on the wall. He didn't offer her a seat. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city. "Hello, Anissa," he said without turning. "Hello, Michael. Is something urgent?" He turned slowly. His face was stern, unreadable. "I've been hearing things," he began without preamble. "Rumors about your personal life. I don't care about other people's dirty laundry, but there's a catch." He walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "Our work, your factories and the trade councils, is public-facing. We outfit children, doctors, public sector workers. We have to be exemplary, not only in product quality, but in reputation." He opened the folder. "I've received several letters, anonymous and not so anonymous, expressing, let's say, concern about the moral standing of your factory's leadership." Anissa went cold. She understood where this was going. "Michael, it's all lies," she said firmly. "They're slandering me. It's a personal vendetta that has nothing to do with my work." "Maybe," he nodded, "but there's no smoke without fire, as they say. And I can't take the risk. I can't let the shadow of your personal scandal fall on our joint projects." He pulled out a sheet of paper and held it out to her. "This is a notice, terminating our contract." Anissa stared at the document in disbelief. Official letterhead, embossed seal, Coulter's signature, everything was in order. "On what grounds?" she whispered. "We haven't violated a single clause." Coulter tapped a line near the bottom with his finger. "Read." She brought the paper closer. In the special conditions section, fine print read, "The contract may be terminated unilaterally in the event of reputational risks arising from unstable or immoral behavior by the management of the contracting enterprise." Anissa held the termination notice in her hands. The paper was thick and expensive, and the words printed on it felt like a brand searing her skin. This was the end. Not just the end of her career, the end of the factory. Without the trade council orders, they wouldn't last 6 months. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs, and everyone would blame her. She left Coulter's office and walked down the long, echoing corridor of the administration building. She moved without seeing anything in front of her. Kira had won. She hadn't just destroyed Anissa's private life, she had wiped out the work of her life. She had turned her from a respected director into a leper everyone avoided. Back at the factory, Anissa locked herself in her office and sat for a long time, staring out the window. The sewing machines hummed beyond the wall. That sound had always calmed her, made her feel things were steady. Now it sounded like a countdown to disaster. She realized she had lost. In a battle of rumors and public opinion, she could never win. Kira's story, tragic, tearful, righteous, was far more compelling to ordinary people than Anissa's tangled truth. He said, she said, in that game the winner is whoever shouts louder and lies better. And in that, Kira had no equal. So she needed something else. Something that couldn't be argued with. Not rumors, facts. Hard, irrefutable proof. She had to find the real reason Kira disappeared 5 years ago. Not a fabricated illness. Not a mythical clinic. A real weighty reason that made a healthy, capable woman stage her own death. If she found that reason, Kira's carefully built legend would collapse like a house of cards. She began feverishly sorting through everything David had ever said. His lies were now a minefield, and somewhere on that map was the key. He'd kept tripping over himself. At the very start, he'd said Kira died in a car accident. That was his first official version for everyone. But then, Anissa strained her memory, recalling the awful night he came back after her visit to the penthouse. Late, drunk, shattered. He'd mumbled, cried, begged forgiveness. And in that drunken rant, one phrase slipped out. She hadn't noticed it then, too shocked to care. But now it surfaced in her mind with perfect clarity. He'd said, "It was all because of that boat. That damned motorboat, that accident. A boat. Not a car." A discrepancy. Small, insignificant, but details like that are what undo the most careful lies. Why mention a boat out of nowhere? It meant the car crash story was false from the start. And the second drunken slip might be closer to the truth. She decided to start there. The next day she took a day off. Said she felt unwell, and that wasn't a lie. She felt awful. But instead of staying home and pitying herself, she went to the city library. Inside, it was quiet and smelled of old paper. She headed to the archives where bound volumes of the local newspaper were kept. A young librarian looked surprised at her request. All issues for 3 months, 5 years ago. Fall, September, October, November. They rolled out several heavy, dusty carts piled with enormous tomes. Anissa took a table in the back, away from curious eyes, and got to work. It was painstaking, exhausting labor. She scanned page after page, reading the yellowed columns. City news, crime blotter, notices, obituaries. She searched for any mention of David or Kira. Any note about a crash, a water incident, anything unusual. An hour passed, then another. Her eyes throbbed from the tiny type. She finished September. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No traffic accidents involving McLaughlin or Brennan. No incidents on the river. Despair rose in her throat. Maybe she was wrong? Maybe the drunken babble really was just babble? She forced herself to go on. She took the October volume. Again, page by page. Weather updates, winter prep, a review of a concert at the community center, nothing. She was ready to give up, but something made her reach for the last and thickest binder, November. She started turning pages, almost mechanically now, with little hope of finding anything. And then her eye caught a small headline on page 3 in the crime section. The article was tiny, just a few lines, tucked between a report about stolen chickens and a complaint about noisy neighbors. The headline read, "Missing Person." Anissa leaned closer. The piece said that a week earlier, late at night, a local businessman named Theodore Phillips had left his riverside country house on his personal motorboat and never returned. The next day, his empty boat was found washed up several miles downstream. There were no signs of violence on board. A search operation, including divers, turned up nothing. The main version of the investigation was an accident. Possibly the man had fallen overboard in the dark. The name Theodore Phillips meant nothing to her. It sounded like one of those everyday tragedies, just another unfortunate incident. She was about to turn the page when the date caught her attention. The article had been printed in the very same week that, according to David's first story, Kira had supposedly died. A coincidence? Maybe. But Anissa didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She took out her notebook and carefully wrote down the name Theodore Phillips. Then she kept flipping through the archives, this time searching for more mentions of that name, and she found them. Phillips had been a known figure in the city, the owner of a small but aggressive construction company called Monolith. In earlier issues, she found several articles mentioning his firm, and then a sudden thought hit her. She set the newspapers aside and typed 2 names into her phone's search bar, Monolith and BuildTech, the company where David had worked. The results popped up instantly. Several links to local business news sites, articles from 2 or 3 years before she even met David. The headlines read, War. Monolith accuses BuildTech of unfair competition. Theodore Phillips threatens to sue his main rivals. 2 major construction projects at war over prime contract. Everything clicked into place. The missing businessman wasn't just some random man. He was the enemy, the chief commercial rival of the company where David had been a senior engineer. And he vanished, completely disappeared, in the exact same week that Kira did. Anissa sat in the dusty archives, but she no longer saw the yellowed pages in front of her. She saw a clear, sharp picture forming in her mind. Kira's disappearance and Philip's disappearance weren't 2 separate events. They were 2 halves of the same story. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't about illness or a family crisis. It was about a crime, and at the center of it all stood her husband, David. Now she had more than just suspicion. She had a lead, a name, a fact. She snapped a photo of the newspaper clipping on her phone. She knew exactly what she had to do next. She wasn't going to wait anymore, wasn't going to defend herself or react to their moves. She would strike first. And her main target, the weakest link in this whole web, was David. She knew where to find him. He was living with Kira in that same penthouse, but he still worked at BuildTech. Every evening, around 7, he left the office parking lot. She decided to wait for him. She arrived at his office half an hour before the end of the workday. Parked where she could see the exit clearly, but wouldn't be noticed. She sat in the car, calm and focused. No fear, no hesitation, only cold determination. She replayed in her mind what she would say, what she would do. At exactly 7:10, his car rolled out from behind the barrier. Anissa started her engine and followed him at a safe distance. He didn't drive toward the new apartment. Instead, he turned toward their old neighborhood, near their former home. Why? But then she saw where he stopped, outside the building where his closest friend, practically a brother, lived. They had grown up together. Maybe he couldn't stand Kira's constant presence anymore and needed an escape. That worked to her advantage. Talking outside, away from luxury lobbies and doormen, was safer. She waited until he got out of the car. Then, as he lowered his head and walked toward the entrance, she stepped out and called to him. "David!" He flinched like he'd been struck. Spun around. When he saw her, he froze. His face cycled through a whole storm of emotions: fear, shame, surprise, and a faint, pathetic hope. "Anissa, what are you doing here?" "I was waiting for you," she said evenly. "We need to talk. Now." I can't right now," he stammered, glancing around. "Let's not do this here." "Exactly here," she cut him off. "It won't take long." She pulled out her phone, opened the photo of the newspaper clipping, and handed it to him in silence. "Remember this?" He took the phone, confused, looked at the screen, at the small print, the headline, "Missing Person." And in that instant, his composure shattered like glass. The color drained from his face. The phone trembled in his hand. He stared at the photo as if seeing a ghost. Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "From the newspaper archive. 5 years ago. The same week Kira supposedly died in a car crash. Funny, isn't it? In 1 week, one person dies and another vanishes without a trace. Especially when that second person happens to be your company's biggest rival." She locked eyes with him, unflinching. And she saw it, the final collapse of his defenses. He was broken. Completely. "Get in the car," he said hoarsely. "Not here." They got into her car. He sank heavily into the passenger seat and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook, not with fake remorse like before, but with raw animal fear. "It was an accident," he said, voice muffled behind his hands. "We didn't mean to kill him. I swear to you, Anissa." She stayed silent, letting him talk. And he did, rambling, disjointed, jumping from one thought to another. But slowly, through the chaos of his words, the horrifying truth began to take shape. "Phillips, he was digging into me. He found out I'd been taking money from the budgets, overstating material costs, moving cash through fake invoices. He had to file everything, proof. He came to me and said either I pay him a huge sum to keep quiet, or he goes to my boss. That would have been it. Prison." David kept talking, and Anissa listened, piecing it all together. So that's where the money came from, the luxury, the expensive trips he vaguely mentioned. It was theft, corruption. I agreed to pay. I had no choice. I gathered everything we had. We arranged to meet that night at his Riverside house. I was supposed to bring the money and he'd hand me the file. I was going to go alone, but Kira insisted on coming. She said she didn't trust Phillips, that he might try to trick me. He fell silent, breathing hard. We met at his dock. He was already there on his boat. I gave him the bag of money. He counted it and laughed. Said it wasn't enough. Said he'd bleed me dry for the rest of my life. And he didn't give me the file. David paused, as if mustering the strength to say the worst of it. We started shouting. And then Kira, she was like a madwoman. She'd always had a temper, but I'd never seen her like that. She grabbed a small anchor from the deck, the kind you tie a boat with, and she hit him. She struck Phillips on the head. He spoke in a whisper, staring at a fixed point. He didn't make a sound. He just swayed and fell overboard into the dark water. There was a splash, and that was it. Silence. We waited. We thought he'd come up. He didn't. We panicked. We realized what we'd done. There it was. The truth. Dirty, terrifying, bloody. There had been no illness. There had been a killing, or at least manslaughter, and a cover-up. The plan was Kira's, David went on, his voice barely audible. Her mind snapped into gear right away. She said no one had seen us, that we had to leave immediately, and that she needed to disappear. Because if they found Phillips's body, there'd be an investigation, and eventually it would lead to us. She said she'd fake her death, go away, wait for things to cool down. And I had to stay. Tell everyone she died in a car accident, manage our money, wait for her to come back. He lifted his eyes to Anissa's, full of tears and despair. I was terrified. I would have done anything. I agreed. I loved her, and I was afraid of prison. I did everything she said. I lied to everyone, my parents, our friends. And then I met you, and I really did love you, Anissa. You were like light, like salvation. I wanted a new life. I almost believed she'd never return. He fell silent, emptied out by his confession. Anissa sat, absorbing it. The picture was complete, missing only one last piece. Why come back now? She asked quietly. And why do this to me? To all of us. David let out a bitter sound that was almost a laugh. Because that's who she is. She's always been like that. She takes whatever she considers hers and destroys whatever stands in her way. He looked down at his trembling hands. She came back because she needed money, a lot of it, and because she realized the danger had passed. Phillips's case was long ago closed as an accident. Now she can live openly. And me, she doesn't need me anymore. I'm baggage, a witness. He looked at Anissa again, panic in his eyes. You don't get it. That embezzlement at work, the file Phillips took, that was her plan from the start. She came up with it. She pulled me in, and she kept everything. Every invoice, every transfer, every receipt, and every document has my signature. Only mine. He grabbed Anissa's hand. His fingers were ice cold. She's got me on a leash. Since the day she came back, she's been blackmailing me with those papers. She said if I don't do exactly what she says, if I don't help toss you out of the apartment and out of this town, she'll take the file to the police. And I'll be the only one who goes down. She'll walk away clean. She's thought of everything, Anissa. She always does. David's words fell into the car's silence like stones into a deep well. Blackmail. That was it. The last link in the chain. It explained his cowardice, his obedience, his betrayal. He wasn't just an accomplice. He was a hostage. And now, after laying it all out, after confessing the worst of it, he broke for good. He didn't cry anymore. He just stared ahead with empty eyes, the look of a man standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing there's no way back. Kira will destroy me too, he whispered. The second I'm no use to her, she'll hand that file over. And that's it. The end. She'll leave, squeaky clean with the money. Something switched on inside him then, an instinct for self-preservation that had been buried under fear and guilt. He turned to Anissa, and in his eyes flickered something new. Desperate, reckless resolve. I'm not going to prison, he said, steady now. I'm not rotting there because of her. You have to help me. Help both of us. Anissa looked at him without a shred of sympathy. Help him? The man who had wrecked her life? But she knew he was her only chance now, her only source, the weak link in Kira's armor, and she had to use it. How can I help you, David? She asked, her voice cold. She holds all the cards. She has the documents on you, the marriage certificate, the deed to the apartment. All we have are your words, and no one will believe them. There has to be something, he pleaded, clutching her sleeve. Some piece of evidence against her. She couldn't have planned everything. She's sentimental, yes, it's crazy, but she is. She would never throw away her old life completely. Her things, everything she had before her death, she wouldn't let it go. She loves herself too much. Loves her memories. He dug through his mind, searching, and suddenly his eyes widened. He remembered. The storage unit. He blurted, "That's it, storage. When she died, we had to get rid of her things to make it look real. Her parents took some we gave away. But the dearest, most precious things, her dresses, jewelry, papers, albums, she wouldn't let us throw them out. She said someday she'd come back for them. We rented a locker at an old warehouse on the edge of town. One of those places where nobody asks questions. I paid the fees for all 5 years. It's registered in my name. I completely forgot." He pulled out his wallet, hands shaking, flipping through old receipts and business cards until he found a small worn key with a plastic tag. Number 137. "Here," he said, handing it to Anissa. "Take it. She has no idea I've given this to you. She still thinks I'm on her side. Go there. Her whole past is inside. Maybe you'll find something. A letter. A diary. Anything. It's our only chance." Anissa took the key. It was cold and heavy. It was a chance, faint, fragile, but real. "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" "I'll go back to her," he said, bitterness in his voice. "I'll pretend nothing happened. I'll stall, but I can't keep it up for long. She's too smart. She'll sense I'm up to something. You don't have much time, Anissa." Very little. She dropped him off at his friend's building and drove away. She didn't go home. She drove straight to the warehouse. The place was even more desolate than she'd imagined. An old brick hangar in an industrial zone, ringed by a rusted fence. Inside long, dim corridors lined with rows of identical metal doors. It smelled of dust, damp, and forgetting. She found locker number 137. The key turned with effort in the rusty lock. She pulled the heavy metal door open. Inside, it was pitch dark. She turned on her phone flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing a heap of belongings piled together. Old furniture draped with sheets, boxes tied with rope, suitcases. It felt like a tomb. A tomb of Kira McLaughlin's past life, Anissa closed the door behind her and got to work. She felt like a thief rifling through someone else's memories, but she pushed that feeling away. She wasn't looking for memories, she was looking for a weapon. She opened one box after another. In one there was a fine porcelain dinner set. In another, closed silk and cashmere dresses, dozens of pairs of high heels. The wardrobe of a woman who loved luxury and made sure everyone knew it. Anissa searched every pocket, every fold. Nothing. She spent over an hour digging through it all. Then she moved on to the suitcases. Papers filled them, old university notes, work documents from before Kira's marriage, folders with receipts and bills. Anissa checked each page carefully. Again, nothing suspicious. Time passed. The cold, damp air began to bite through her coat. Despair crept back in. Maybe David was wrong. Maybe Kira wasn't as sentimental as he thought and had destroyed anything that could expose her. Only one box was left, the biggest one, tucked away in the farthest corner. Anissa dragged it toward the light and opened it. Inside were photo albums, dozens of them, thick and gaudy, bound in velvet and fake leather. She sat right there on the cold concrete floor and started flipping through them. Kira as a teenager at a college party. Kira with her parents at the seaside. Her wedding with David, smiling, glowing. Vacations in Paris, Rome, Prague. In every photo, the same confident, possessive smile, the smile of a woman who knew the world belonged to her. Anissa turned the pages one after another, her disgust and hopelessness growing. Just memories, happy, carefree snapshots, no clues. She picked up the last album, the thickest one, wrapped in ugly burgundy velvet. She flipped through it absently, almost ready to give up, when her fingers felt something strange. 2 pages near the middle were glued together, thicker than the rest, as if hiding something inside. Anissa's heartbeat quickened. She tried gently prying them apart with her nail, but they were tightly sealed, glued on purpose along the edges. She pulled a small nail file from her bag and began carefully slicing through the seam, millimeter by millimeter. Finally, the pages came apart. Hidden inside a cutout space in the cardboard was a folded piece of school notebook paper, yellowed and brittle with age. It was a letter, handwritten, in that same broad, confident script she'd seen on the check from the Fursalon. Anissa unfolded it. At the top was a date 5 years ago, just 1 week after Philip's disappearance and Kira's death. The letter was addressed to "My dear Mommy." She began to read, and with every line, her eyes widened in horror. This wasn't just evidence. It was a confession, written with cynical, triumphant malice. "Hi, Mommy. I'm fine. I'm safe. Our plan worked perfectly, better than we ever imagined. That idiot Phillips got what he deserved. He won't be in our way anymore. I doubt they'll ever find the body. And my death, it's brilliant. Everyone's grieving, crying, bringing flowers to an empty grave." What a show. David, of course, was the same as always, whining, scared, but he did everything I told him to. He's useful, my spineless fool, the perfect scapegoat if things ever go wrong. I've left him with enough instructions and money. Let him manage our assets while I relax somewhere warm for a few years. Don't worry about me, and most importantly, don't feel sorry for him. He's just a tool. When the time comes, I'll come back and take back everything that's rightfully mine. Anissa sat on the cold concrete floor, the letter trembling in her hand. This was it. The weapon she had been searching for. Not just proof, a death sentence for Kira, written in her own hand. Every word tore away the mask of the innocent victim, revealing her true face. A cold, calculating predator. Anissa folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the hidden pocket of her bag. She didn't look through anything else. The one thing that mattered had been found. She stepped out of the dusty crypt of the past into the open air. It was already late. The city lights were glowing. But for Anissa, this was the first true dawn. Her first thought was, the police, right now. Take the letter, file a report. But she dismissed it almost immediately. She knew Kira too well. What would Kira do when cornered? She'd turn on the charm, unleash her perfect performance. Cry, scream that it was a forgery, that this was the revenge of a bitter woman trying to destroy her happy rival. She'd hire the best lawyers, the best handwriting experts money could buy, and to the public it would look once again like 2 women fighting over a man. And once again there'd be those who took Kira's side. No, simply handing her over to the justice system wouldn't be enough. That wouldn't restore Anissa's name. It wouldn't wash away the humiliation. Kira's downfall had to be just like Anissa's, public, loud, and final. She had to detonate this bomb in a way that left no survivors among those who had helped destroy her. So no one would ever doubt again who was the victim and who the monster. She went home to her apartment, still a battlefield. She took out the letter and snapped several high-quality photos of it on her phone. Then she hid the original in the safest place she could think of, a bank safe deposit box she'd rented that morning. Now she had both the evidence and a secure backup. She sat in her kitchen, thinking. She needed a stage, the perfect stage, a place filled with the same people who had turned their backs on her, whispered behind her back, and judged her. She had to win back her name right in front of their eyes, in the same place she'd lost it. But how could she gather them all in one room? And then, as if in answer to her thoughts, the phone rang. It was Janet. "Anissa, where are you? I've been worried." Her friend's voice sounded anxious. "Something happened. I was cleaning up your office after you left and found this on the floor near the trash bin. I think someone dropped it there on purpose, for you to see." "What is it?" Anissa asked. "An invitation. I took a picture. I'm sending it now." "Look." A message came through a second later. Anissa opened it. It was a photo of an elegant embossed card. The gold lettering gleamed against thick ivory paper. "Kira McLaughlin and her family cordially invite you to a celebration of life, in honor of her miraculous recovery and return. We are delighted to share our joy and celebrate this second birth with you." Below were the date, time, and place, and Anissa knew the place all too well. The Imperial Restaurant, the most expensive, prestigious spot in town. The same place where the industrialists' banquet had taken place. The same place she'd run from, shamed and humiliated. Anissa laughed. For the first time in weeks, she laughed out loud. It was unbelievable, too perfect to be real. In her arrogance and blind faith in her own immunity, Kira had built her own scaffold. She was inviting the audience to her own execution. "Janet, this isn't just an invitation," Anissa said into the phone, her voice bright with adrenaline. "It's a gift." She quickly told her friend the plan. It was bold, risky, almost crazy, but Janet didn't hesitate for a second. "I'm with you," she said firmly. "All the way." "What do we need to do?" The plan began to take shape. They went over details, calculating every move, every tiny thing. Anissa didn't want just a scandal. She needed a perfectly staged operation. She prepared for that day like it was the biggest battle of her life. She put her affairs at the factory in order, giving Janet all key authority in case something went wrong. She contacted the lawyer, Goldman, and without going into details, asked him to be on standby on the day of the celebration. She was running on adrenaline. The fear was gone. Only cold calculation remained. She knew Kira would be preparing too, and that she wouldn't stop at anything to make sure her greatest enemy didn't ruin her triumph. The day before the party, while Anissa was giving a final briefing at the factory, Janet called her cell. Panic cracked her voice. "Anissa, leave the factory! Now!" "Janet, what happened?" "Calm down. Talk clearly." "I can't over the phone." "Just go. I'll be at your place in a minute." Anissa didn't understand, but the raw panic in her friend's voice was so real that she obeyed. She told security she had to leave urgently, and 5 minutes later, she was in her car. Janet was waiting in the courtyard, pale as a sheet. "Get in." "We have to go," she said, jumping into the passenger seat. They drove a few blocks and stopped in a quiet little park. "What happened?" Anissa demanded. Janet took several deep breaths, trying to steady herself. "I was in the smoking area. I overheard something. Our foreman from the pressing shop, Peter Carson, was there with another worker. Carson's a distant relative of the McLaughlins. He's always been loyal to them." "And?" Anissa pressed. "He was bragging. He was a little drunk. He said he'd been paid good money for a small favor." Janet stared at Anissa with wide, terrified eyes. "He said tonight he's going to adjust one of the steam presses. The one you're scheduled to inspect tomorrow morning. He said the safety valve will accidentally blow. Right when you're standing next to it." The car sat in the quiet park, but inside, the air rang with tension. Janet's words about sabotage hit Anissa's frayed nerves like a spark to a powder keg. She thought Kira would keep playing subtle rumors, legal pressure. She'd miscalculated. Kira wasn't playing anymore. She decided to remove Anissa from the board. Physically, a cold wave of fear slid down Anissa's spine, then hardened into ice-cold fury. Attempted murder. That's where this had gone. It wasn't just family drama anymore. This was something else entirely. And it freed Anissa's hands. She crossed the line, Anissa said quietly. Her voice was calm, but the steel in it made Janet shiver. "And she'll pay for it." "What are you going to do?" Janet whispered. "We have to go to the police." "No, not yet. A report is just words, and his drunken bragging isn't proof." He'll deny everything. I need his confession. The plan that had been a reckless gamble a moment ago became the only way forward. It had to work. Perfect. Go back to the factory, Anissa told her friend. Act normal. No one can know we spoke. I'm going home. I have to get ready. She didn't go home. She went to an electronics store and bought the smallest, most powerful voice recorder she could find. Then she returned to the factory. It was already dark. She didn't go through the main gate, but slipped in through the back, where only the old guard knew her. She went to her office. She switched on the recorder and tucked it into the breast pocket of her blazer. Then she called in Peter Carson, the foreman. He came in, a little surprised to be summoned so late. A big, heavy man with a bull stare. He still smelled of booze. You wanted me, Anissa? He asked with a lazy smirk. Yes, Peter. Have a seat. Anissa pointed to the chair in front of her desk. She looked at him in silence for several seconds, letting the tension build. He started to fidget, his swagger fading. Nice time in the smoking area today? She asked softly. He flinched. His eyes darted. What about it? I can't take a break? Peter, you can take a break during work. After work, you can even brag if you want. For instance, about the good money you've been paid for a little favor. Carson's face turned gray. He realized he'd been caught. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but his voice shook. You don't? Anissa raised her voice. And let me remind you, you bragged today that you're going to cause an accident with the steam press. That you want me boiled alive by scalding water tomorrow. That's not a little favor, Peter. That's called attempted murder by prior arrangement. She stood up suddenly, planting her hands on the desk. And I have a recording of your conversation. And witnesses. So you have two choices, Carson. Either we call the police right now, and you go to prison for a very long time. Or you sit down and give a full, honest statement right into this recorder. Who hired you? How much did they pay? What exactly were you told to do? Choose. Your time starts now. He looked at her like a trapped mouse staring at a snake. He was caught and he knew it. The threat of prison was real and terrifying. Within a minute, he broke. No, police, he rasped. Please, don't ruin me. Damn it, I'll tell you everything. And he did. He told her how Rhonda McLaughlin, Kira's mother, had found him, how she'd handed him an envelope full of cash, how she'd given him clear instructions to sabotage the press, but make it look like a workplace accident. Anissa listened in silence, recording every trembling word. When he finished, she switched off the recorder. Tomorrow you'll show up for work like nothing happened, she said flatly. And if you breathe a single word to anyone, this recording will be on the investigator's desk by morning. Do you understand? He nodded frantically. Now get out, she said coldly, and pray I stay alive and well. When he was gone, Anissa felt a shiver run through her. Now she had everything, Kira's letter and the confession of her hired saboteur. She was ready for the final battle. The entire next day, the last before the celebration, she spent preparing. She wasn't alone anymore. Now she needed allies. Her first call was to Meryl Phillips, the widow of the businessman who had drowned 5 years ago. Anissa had found her number through old contacts. Meryl had lived in limbo all those years. Her husband, neither alive nor dead, officially missing. She couldn't claim inheritance or move on with her life. Meryl, hello. My name is Anissa Brennan, she began. I'm calling about your husband, Theodore. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I know what happened to him, Anissa continued. I know who was responsible. I can't explain everything over the phone, but tomorrow night at the Imperial Restaurant, the people who killed your husband will be celebrating their victory. I'm asking you to come. You'll hear the whole truth. The justice you've been waiting for these 5 years. It can finally happen. She didn't know if the widow would believe her or if she'd come, but she had to try. Her second call was to Daniel Norris, a journalist for the regional paper. He was known for his honesty and for never shying away from a scandal or danger. Anissa had met him a few times at city events. Daniel, hi, it's Anissa Brennan. I've got a story for you. One that'll blow this city apart. Murder, fraud, corruption, everything you love. Sounds intriguing, Anissa, he replied. What kind of evidence do you have? Ironclad, but I'll show it to you tomorrow at the Imperial, 8 p.m. Just be there with your camera. I promise you won't regret it. She hung up. The pieces were on the board. Now it was just a matter of time. That evening, while she was rehearsing her speech in her head, her phone rang. The number was hidden. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Anissa, it's me, David. His voice was a fearful whisper. Soft music played faintly in the background. What do you want? She asked coldly. I can't talk long. She's in the shower. Listen to me carefully. We had a fight, a bad one. I told her I couldn't live like this anymore, that I was going to the police. And what did she say? She laughed in my face, he said, and his voice cracked with panic. She said I wasn't going anywhere, that I'm a coward and I'll do what she tells me. Then she showed me something. He paused, catching his breath. What did she show you, David? A ticket, he whispered. She has a plane ticket, the day after tomorrow, morning flight, to Dubai, one way. Anissa froze. She said her plan is almost complete. Tomorrow she'll have her grand night. She'll see you completely destroyed. And the next morning, she'll be on a plane, gone for good. And me, I'll be left behind to deal with the police over the embezzlement. She said she'll send the folder with the evidence against me to the prosecutor's office anonymously. As a goodbye gift. Anissa felt the blood drain from her face. And the money, she asked quietly. All of it, he said bitterly. Everything we stole, everything we had in our accounts, she's already moved it offshore, converted it into diamonds, said it's easier to carry them across borders. She's taking everything, Anissa, and leaving scorched earth behind, and me with it. The line went dead as suddenly as it began. Anissa sat there for a moment, the phone still at her ear, listening to the empty beeps. Scorched earth, diamonds, escape. That was the true ending of Kira's plan. Not just to reclaim her husband and her status, but to take everything down to the last cent and vanish, leaving David to pay for their crimes alone. In that moment, Anissa realized that tomorrow night wouldn't just be about revenge for her ruined life. It would be her one chance to stop a criminal before she disappeared forever. Her last only chance. She slept just a few hours, but woke up with crystal clarity. A whole day she moved like a perfectly tuned machine. She didn't think about fear. She didn't think about failure. She just did what she had to do. That evening she got ready. She didn't wear an evening gown. Instead, she chose a simple, elegant black sheath dress. No jewelry. Her hair pulled back into a tight, smooth bun. Barely there makeup that only emphasized her pale skin and dark, determined eyes. She looked in the mirror and saw not a woman going to a party, but a soldier heading into battle. Into her small purse, she placed only 3 things: her phone with the photos of the letter, the tiny recorder with Carson's confession, and the new key to her apartment. The Imperial restaurant shimmered with light. Expensive cars lined the entrance, doormen in uniforms holding the doors for guests. Anissa walked inside. The same hall, the same glittering chandeliers, the same hum of conversation, but tonight, everything was different. When she entered, the noise dipped for a moment. Dozens of eyes turned to her. She saw it all in them: curiosity, disdain, malice. She wasn't welcome here. She was a ghost, haunting their feast. She ignored their stares. She walked to the center of the hall, took a glass of water from a waiter's tray, and stood by one of the marble columns. She looked around. Everyone was there. The entire city elite. The mayor and his wife, the steel plant director, the chief architect, all those who had judged her without knowing the truth. In the far corner, she spotted Daniel Norris with his small camera. He caught her gaze and gave a barely visible nod. Not far from the entrance, she saw a pale, tense woman, Meryl. She'd come. And somewhere in the crowd was Janet, her loyal only friend. Everyone was in place, and at the center of it all, of course, was Kira. She was dazzling. She wore a long, silver gown that shimmered with every movement. Diamonds sparkled on her neck and ears. She floated from guest to guest, laughing, accepting compliments. Next to her stood David, like a shadow. He was in a perfect suit, but his face looked lifeless, his eyes empty, his smile fixed in place like it had been glued there. Kira's mother, Rhonda, sat at the main table, glowing with pride like a queen mother. Finally, the music faded. Kira, holding a glass of champagne, stepped onto a small stage where microphones stood. David joined her. "My dear friends," she began, her voice amplified through the speakers filling the hall. "My beloved, wonderful friends," she began her speech, and it was a masterpiece. She spoke about the long, dark years fighting a terrible illness, about the moments of despair when hope seemed lost, about the strength of spirit that helped her survive. She thanked the doctors, God, and of course her devoted husband David, who had waited and believed in her all those years. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Her voice trembled. The hall listened, breathless. Many women quietly wiped tears from their cheeks. "And here I am," she cried triumphantly, raising her glass. "I'm back. I'm alive, and I want to toast life, love, and the truth that a real family always wins. The hall erupted in applause. People rose from their seats, chanting, "Kira, Kira." It was her triumph, complete and final. And just as the applause began to fade, Anissa stepped forward. She walked out from behind the column into the center of the room. Silence fell instantly. Every head turned toward her. Kira, standing on the stage, stared at her first in shock, then with barely concealed fury. "You're applauding a miraculous return," Anissa began. Her voice was calm and clear, every word echoing through the silence like a bell. "But I want to tell you another story. A story about another miracle, a miracle of survival. Mine, one that almost didn't happen." She took a small recorder from her purse, pressed play. And the terrified, trembling voice of Peter Carson, the foreman, filled the room. "Rhonda gave me an envelope, told me to mess with the press, make it look like an accident, that she'd get scalded." A collective gasp swept through the hall. People turned from Anissa to Rhonda McLaughlin, whose face had turned the color of ash. "That was the first part of the story," Anissa continued, switching off the recorder, "about how they planned to get rid of me so I wouldn't ruin this celebration. Now here's the second part, about why I became such a problem in the first place." She slowly turned toward the woman standing near the entrance. "I want you all to look at this woman," Anissa said. "Her name is Merrill Phillips. 5 years ago, her husband, businessman Theodore Phillips, vanished without a trace. His case was closed, written off as an accident. That happened the same week Kira McLaughlin was supposedly fighting a deadly illness in a Swiss clinic. Norris, the journalist, turned his camera toward Merrill, then toward Kira, whose radiant complexion was beginning to fade. "Kira told you a fairy tale," Anissa said, her voice now ice cold. "But I'm going to read you the truth, written in her own hand." A week after Merrill's husband drowned, she took out her phone, turned on the screen, and lifted it so everyone could see the photo of the letter. This letter was written by Kira to her mother. I'll read just a few lines. And she began to read clearly, mercilessly, each word dripping with the venom that had been in them all along. "Our plan worked perfectly. That idiot Phillips got what he deserved. David, of course, was the same as always, whining, afraid. He's useful, my spineless fool. The perfect scapegoat if something goes wrong." When she finished, the hall was dead silent. You could hear the clink of a single glass somewhere in the back. Then came a strangled cry, "Rhonda!" She clutched her chest and collapsed into her chair, unconscious. Kira's face went white as chalk. The mask was gone. Her eyes, full of raw hatred and panic, locked on Anissa. "Lies!" she shrieked. "All lies! A forgery! She's insane." She spun around, trying to run to flee the stage, the hall, the city. And at that moment, David, who had stood motionless the entire time, made his choice. He saw Kira running, leaving him behind. He saw prison and disgrace looming ahead, and he chose survival. "She's telling the truth," he shouted, his voice so loud the glasses on the tables rattled. He pointed a trembling finger at Kira, frozen mid-step. Every word of it, about Phillips, about the letter, everything. That broke the last thread holding the crowd together. Chaos exploded. Guests recoiled from Kira in horror. At that moment, the restaurant doors swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stood in the doorway. They walked calmly, confidently, straight toward the stage. Kira screamed, a wild, piercing sound that cut through the room. She darted left and right, desperate for an escape, but it was too late. One of the officers reached her and took her firmly, but gently, by the arm. "Kira McLaughlin? You're under arrest on suspicion of murder." She struggled, clawed, cursed, but they led her toward the exit. Her dazzling silver gown trailed behind her, sweeping over the floor, littered with shards of broken glass. Paramedics rushed toward Rhonda, who had collapsed into a chair. They carried her away humiliated, broken, forever cast out from the society she'd so desperately wanted to rule. Anissa stood in the middle of the wreckage, quiet, motionless. The noise began to fade. Guests, pale and shaken, drifted toward the exits, avoiding her eyes. Merrill walked up to her, tears shining in her eyes, and silently took her hand. Journalist Daniel Norris lowered his camera and gave her a respectful nod. When the hall was nearly empty, Anissa slowly made her way to the door. She walked past tables covered with untouched food, past overturned chairs, past the ruins of what had once been a celebration. She felt no joy, no triumph, only an immense, consuming relief. She stepped outside. The cool night air brushed against her face. She took a deep breath. It was over. Her name was cleared. Her life torn apart and trampled was hers again. She reached into her purse, pulled out the new key to her apartment, gripped it tightly in her hand, and without looking back, walked home. And that's where our story ends. What a tense, dramatic finale, don't you think? We went through this nightmare alongside Anissa, through lies, betrayal, and humiliation. We watched her world collapse, watched as they tried to erase her, to destroy her, not just emotionally, but physically. And in the end, we witnessed her victory, complete, public, and absolute. But now that the emotions have settled a bit, I want to ask you something. Do you think Anissa did the right thing? On one hand, she was pushed into a corner. She had no other choice. Simply going to the police with that letter would have been too risky. Kira could have denied everything, painted her as a vengeful, unhinged woman. The public exposure was the only way to make sure the truth was heard and to ensure she'd never be in danger again. But on the other hand, didn't she in that moment become just as ruthless as her enemies? That public humiliation, the downfall of an entire family in front of the whole town. Was it truly necessary? Or was it revenge? Could she have done it differently? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Did you have any questions about the story? Maybe a moment that felt especially powerful or controversial? Share everything in the comments below. If this story touched you, if you found yourself rooting for Anissa and waiting for justice to finally prevail, please don't forget to like this video. Your support means a lot to us. And of course, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next story, each one as gripping and emotional as this one. We read all your comments and truly appreciate your attention. Wishing you peace in your heart and warmth in your home. Take care and see you in the next story.